Hey, welcome to you on this Wednesday, January 27th. My name is Logan Lockhart, and this is Lock It Up Sports Talk here on the Fines Huddle Network. We do this every Wednesday, 1 o'clock. Usually a guest with me. We'll get back to that next week. And remember, next week, it will be the lead up to Super Bowl 55. We do know our matchup now. Tampa Bay, Kansas City. The Bucs are the first team ever to host a Super Bowl game. It's hard to believe that, but it is true. And I was saying this on Twitter the other day. I'm going, hey, I thought after the Minneapolis Miracle, there would be a situation where the Vikings would be in the Super Bowl that year. It seemed like momentum was building for them to be in that game, and it just didn't happen. Tom Brady's Buccaneers, the first team ever to host the Super Bowl and play in the game. How much effect is that going to have? I'm hearing 22,000 people at the game. We'll see. We'll see. Now, it is going to be a new dynamic. It would have been quite something if this was a normal year and you just had a packed house and it's in Tampa and the Bucs are in the Super Bowl. That would have been interesting. But 22,000, not sure how much of an effect it will have. The only thing I can think of is that's the Bucs field. That's where they've played all year. They're comfortable there. That's the only advantage I can see. It's not a normal year, though. So we can't act like, of course this happens. The first time ever in NFL history. Of course it's in this kind of year. We'll get to all the Super Bowl stuff. Early odds for the Super Bowl. We'll go through it. Tell you what I think of that. Right now, Kansas City favored by 3. I think that's about fair. But the big matchup, and I'll get to this a little later, but the big matchup, it's going to be if the Chiefs offense can keep up what they did last week. Because, look, 38 points last week, but before that, they weren't scoring that many points. And the Bucs defense, it's been 10 consecutive games. They haven't allowed more than 27 points. This is an interesting matchup. Bucs, we're still waiting to hear on some guys. Are they going to play? Winfield is one, Antonio Brown another, but particularly Winfield on the defensive side. That's a big one. And for all we want to say, the Bucs here, the Bucs there, they're playing fantastic. The Packers were given some opportunities there in that game to kind of take it and win the game. They didn't take their opportunities. We have to acknowledge that. First of all, and I'm a big Tom Brady guy, but we have to acknowledge that there was a chance there for the Packers to really take that game and run away with it. Interceptions, there were 3 by Tom Brady. You don't see that often, but that's what it was. But I'll start today with some baseball, and George Springer, officially a Blue Jay, introduced by the team today. A lot of interesting things coming out of that press conference. They signed Marcus Semien last night. So as anticipated, they get that infielder. They get another guy. There's a lot of flexibility on this Blue Jays team. It's going to be quite something. Just like last year, they were flexible. There are a lot of guys that can play multiple positions. It's at another level this year. Marcus Semien, I don't think will play shortstop. I think he's going to go to second base. And then Kevin Biggio, he's going to have to get real comfortable at third base real quickly. Biggio can play multiple positions. If you want him as an outfielder, he can do that. But the point is that Semien, who, by the way, has really improved as a defensive player. There was a time, maybe 5 years ago, he was the worst defensive player in the sport. But he's really improved. I expect Bichette to stay at short. You put Semien at second base. And then at third base, you kind of have this platoon situation where it's Biggio sometimes, Guerrero Jr. sometimes. Rowdy Tellez can play first base when Guerrero isn't there at first. And you go from there. George Springer, though. When I was with you last week, I was expecting Michael Brantley to be a Toronto Blue Jay. That was reported hours after the show. It was disregarded, and he re-signed in Houston. It appears the Jays were close, but now that you think about it, wow, that would have been a crowded outfield. A trade would have to be made. A trade still could be made just based on Springer, right? So there's a lot of different parts going on with the Blue Jays, but what we know, and Shapiro said this in the presser today, we do know that that's it for the big moves. Blue Jays are, in essence, done for the offseason. Minor moves here and there, maybe a couple arms in the pen you can bring in, minor league deals, spring training tryouts, different things like that. But in general, this is the offseason, and they've done it. And Shapiro did say as well, and Ross Adkins, one or the other, they acknowledged that this was the plan the whole time. It was once they believe this team is ready to win, we're going to go out, dip into free agency, make their big moves. You question, they signed Ryu last winter. 2 years in a row now, the Blue Jays are active in free agency. They're amongst the pack of teams that have made big-time moves. And you just think to yourself, this Blue Jays team, they've overtaken the Red Sox. I think I can confidently say that. The Rays are always a wild card in this division. They trade Blake Snell. They lose Morton to free agency. He's in Atlanta now. But the Rays, let's not forget, they got still one of the best systems in baseball. They're going to be good. This is how the Rays operate. The Rays are still going to be good, I believe. But then again, the Rays, historically, they can be good one year, and then the next year they're kind of due for a random fallback. And then they'll be back the next year. So the Rays are going to be a team to watch because, after all, this team was in the World Series. Hall of Fame stuff, though, and this kind of dominated the story of the day last night in baseball. You did have Simeon side up the Jays. You had JT Realmuto re-signed in Philadelphia. But the Hall of Fame stuff, nobody elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame. First time since 2013. Now, players on that ballot did end up getting in through other forms, but this is a shutout. And it's the first real shutout on the ballot since 1960. You had Schilling, you had Clemens, you had Bonds. They're all on the ballot. Schilling had the highest. He was the closest to reaching the 75% magical percentage mark. Couldn't get it. 16 votes short of being elected. The thing of the Hall of Fame is this. 2021, what we just saw last night, this is almost like the prelude to the chaos that we're going to see next year. Because next year, that's the last year for Bonds and for Clemens. Schilling, that should be his last year, but he did say through Facebook that he sent a letter to the Hall of Fame saying he wants his name removed altogether. That's not up to him, though, so we'll have to see how that plays out. The point is that Bonds, Schilling, Clemens, 10th year eligibility. That's it for all of them next year. And then you add in newcomers on the ballot, Alex Rodriguez, David Ortiz. Yesterday was just the prelude. Next year is where the chaos starts. How's that going to work? Where are we going to draw the line on not inducting these guys? This was what was remarkable to me. 14 blank ballots. You had 14 people who just didn't vote for anyone. Blank ballots. It's amazing to me. And you got to wonder what they're thinking. I mean, I would like to give anyone the benefit of the doubt when they're voting. And if they don't believe anyone on that ballot is worthy, then you don't vote for anyone. You give them the benefit of the doubt. But 14 different voters just didn't vote for anyone. Blank ballots, if you can believe it. The thing about the Hall of Fame, and I know when people hear these Hall of Fame discussions, they roll their eyes and they go, oh, come on, it's so tiresome and the same old nonsense of the Hall of Fame. But this is going to be a huge story next year because next year is when the action really happens. So what's going to happen next year? I still believe Barry Bonds will get in. It's his last year next year. I think this has been the plan the whole time. Just wait until the last year of eligibility and then vote him in. Same with Clemens, right? It's just unbelievable. Obviously, this has nothing to do with baseball. It has to do with off the field stuff, right? And you can make the argument that PED use is on the field stuff, but look, these guys, they were never actually charged and formally testing positive for PEDs. It's reports. The Balco, Mitchell, whatever you want to call it, that's where all this stems from. So at the end of the day, it just gets really interesting with Rodriguez and Ortiz next year. That's when things really take a leap because, look, when you have no one get elected, the only positive I think you can say is that Larry Walker and Derek Jeter will get their day alone on that podium in July 25th. Is the ceremony. They were inducted last year or elected, and now they'll get their time to be honored and celebrated without any newcomers that were elected. That's the only positive I think you can take from this is that Jeter and Walker will have their day. But again, no one is elected, and next year is when it gets really interesting. Yesterday was just the prelude to the chaos that's going to come. A-Rod, Ortiz. I don't know how the voting is going to go with that. I mean, that's just going to be a story to watch. After the World Series is done, this is going to be the story, right? Because this is going to be one of the more intriguing Hall of Fame watches that we've seen, 2022. Yesterday was just the beginning of it. Now, before I get to some more football stuff, I talked about it at the beginning. I'll get to some hockey. The Leafs. Leafs are playing well. The Leafs are a team right now that, we always talked about this team kind of running away with the division. I don't see it to be that case just because, every point stays within the division. I don't see the Leafs, unless they go on a huge tear. But I don't see the Leafs really run away at this thing, but they're playing well. And the fourth line last night, hey, listen, for all the talk about the veterans and bringing in Thornton and having Spezza back for another year, that fourth line really was something to watch. I mean, they're fast, they get the job done, and it really confirms the idea to me that the only reason that so many veterans were brought in was just because you need depth in this kind of year, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, when you got guys in your fourth line, Travis Boyd, who looked good in the inter-scrimmage games before the season started, Engvall I've always liked, who's now getting more of a chance here, and then Joey Anderson, who was traded for Andreas Johnsson. He came from New Jersey. That fourth line works, right? And if they're going to remain effective like that, then it's something to keep an eye on. Thornton's out for some time here. Nick Robertson's a guy that everyone seems to like. I like him too. But he's out right now, and he's just not getting his chance. Goaltending, Anderson's looking a lot better, right? He had a couple rough games at the beginning. But once he turns it around, and we know the thing about Frederik Andersen and this Toronto Maple Leafs team, if he plays well, everything just seems to be going right. When he doesn't play well, you run into problems, right? So if he's playing well, you're all good. The Leafs get set for a few in Edmonton now. Just how it goes. You're going to see a lot of these teams. You're going to see Matthew Tkachuk again. Tkachuk's a guy that gets under the skin of a lot of fans, a lot of teams. That's just kind of the player he is. If he's on your team, you love him. And if he's not, you don't. So we've seen many players like that in the past. So you're going to see a lot of Tkachuk if you're a Leafs fan. This is not this typical year when you're going to run into Calgary just twice and then, okay, well, see you next year. Now you're going to see Tkachuk a lot. Montreal's playing really well. And Montreal's a team that, to me, they just, like, everything's clicking. They're kind of building off that momentum that they had from the bubble, and they've carried it over. That was the big question mark with Montreal. Can they carry over that momentum? They have. Chemistry is working. I think Bergevin deserves a lot of credit here, right? He made moves that got the attention of a lot of people in the hockey world, but we said, okay, well, he's making moves. They're proving to be quite substantial. And at the end of the day, the blue line looks good. Petrie looks like a guy that could compete to be the leading scorer as a defenseman in this division. He's just that kind of player right now. And at the end of the day, what do you need in a season like this? You need good goaltending. Montreal right now, Carey Price, Jake Allen. That's a great tandem. That's the best tandem in the country. So Montreal, they're looking good. They're looking primed for definitely a playoff spot. And you know how this format works. Once you get to the first two rounds are within your division. Montreal seems to be playing Toronto pretty well, right? And there's something about Ottawa, too, with Toronto. Toronto struggles with Ottawa somewhat, and they shouldn't. But Ottawa gives them a tough game, and Ottawa gives a lot of teams tough games. They're having a bit of a tough run in Vancouver right now. But Ottawa works hard. They're going to give the Leafs a tough time. That's just how it goes. Montreal gives the Leafs a very tough time. And that's worrisome when you have to play playoff series against these teams. Those are rivalry series. And I don't want to exclude the rest of the league because it's happening everywhere else. But that's just what we're seeing right now with the NHL. A couple games on the schedule tonight. You got Nashville, Chicago, and then you got the resumption of the Sens Canucks series there, calling them series, right? Just like we do in baseball. The Sens, one win on the year. They're stuck on 3 points. Their one win came against Toronto in that brutal showing by the Leafs on that Friday night, the first Friday of the season, where Anderson wasn't good, Brody wasn't good. It was the dark spot of the season so far for the Leafs. Really the only one. Really the only dark spot I can really find on the Leafs calendar thus far, which is good news. But the Sens and Canucks, wrap up their portion of the schedule tonight. And again, there's something weird about this schedule where we had a lot of games last night throughout the league, and then tonight just 2. And when you look at the schedule and calendar moving forward, that's kind of how it is. You get a lot one night, and then the next night there's 1 or there's 2, sometimes none. It's just one of those things. Now, back to the football. So the Bills have just an incredible year, and here's what we know about the Bills now. The Bills are for real. We said it after the playoff game last year when they lost to Houston. A lot of the conversations were Buffalo's going to be back. They just need to get over that hump. And they are going to be back. And Josh Allen played just as good as anyone in the league this year. There's a lot of reason to be optimistic in Buffalo. I think on the defensive side, it's a bit of disappointment. Beasley played injured. I mean, Beasley, with a courageous effort, he played really injured, and he had some big gains too in that game. My hat goes off to Cole Beasley, the former Cowboy. It was one of those things. The Bills got off to a hot start, and then you watch the game unfold, and you go, oh, I've seen this before. I've seen this. Where have I seen this before? Well, the last year or 2 years with the Chiefs. They get behind early. You saw it in that playoff game against Houston last year. You saw it in the AFC Championship game against Tennessee last year. But the Chiefs, they're a well-oiled machine, man. That when they get rolling, then who's going to stop them? The Bucs, they got to come up with some game plan here that's just going to stop them. You got to stop the Chiefs for a half, right? Because teams are stopping Kansas City for a quarter, and they're putting up points for a quarter. But can you do it for 2 quarters? I think if you can do it for 2 quarters, then you got a shot to beat them. But right now, I said this at the beginning, the Chiefs, they scored 38 last week, but they haven't been scoring at a huge clip the last few weeks here, right? And Tampa Bay, on the other hand, they're a team that hasn't allowed more than 27 points in 10 consecutive games. That's the big matchup. Early odds, Kansas City by 3. We'll see some of the updated over-unders as we progress here and get to Super Bowl week. The Super Bowl, it's going to be one of those games, just one of those games where it's a historic battle. You know, when we look at this game 30 years from now, it will be remembered on the quarterback matchup, right? And that's just the story heading into the game. It's Brady versus Mahomes. The last time these 2 quarterbacks matched up in the playoffs was, of course, that AFC championship game, 2018. Brady wins in overtime. Patriots win the coin toss. The Chiefs, I know they're still bitter about that game, even though they won the Super Bowl the next year, just because there were, some bad luck going on, offsides. Dee Ford went offside, and Brady just got it done, right? And it was one of those scenarios, again, where Kansas City probably was the better team, but who wins? It's Tom Brady. Green Bay, probably the better team. New Orleans, probably the better team. Look at it on paper. Look at all the data we have to analyze every team in this league. Tampa Bay, right? They're better than Washington. That was the only one in the playoffs. Were they better than New Orleans? Probably not on paper. Were they better than Green Bay? Probably not on paper. These are all road games, but who won? Tampa Bay. Tom Brady. He's just done this before. It's the same old story with the Bucs. If they can pull this off, and if a 43 Tom Brady can pull off this win, I'm not quite sure what to tell you. I mean, it's going to be one of the more amazing stories that we've seen. I don't know if Bill Belichick's going to watch. I don't know. I'm joking, of course. I'm sure he's going to watch. But again, you got to wonder about that relationship in New England. And you also got to wonder in New England, and I hope next week maybe to have some guys from the Boston area on the show to preview the Super Bowl and also some baseball offseason stuff. But I question, right? What are people in New England thinking right now when they watch Tom Brady do this? I'm sure they're happy for him. From what I've seen, just as an observer who's not living in the Boston area, from what I've seen, they're pretty pumped up for him, right? The Patriots right now, look, the Patriots, what were they, 7-9? It was kind of a lost season. Cam Newton, the experiment worked for about 2 weeks, and then that was it. So I can't imagine there's any bitterness out of New England. But the point is that you got to wonder what they're thinking in Boston when they watch this happen. It's quite a story. And if Tom Brady can lead this team to a Super Bowl, he's already led them to a Super Bowl appearance, which is amazing enough. And I think for a lot of people, they just draw it up right there and say, okay, he's done enough. This is unbelievable. If he can beat Patrick Mahomes, defending Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year. They're in it again. Every year, Patrick Mahomes has been the starter. They've been a powerhouse. They've looked like the best offense maybe ever. And that's just the story here on Brady versus Mahomes. Again, when we look at this matchup 30 years from now, you're going to be saying this is the story. And it's amazing how Tom Brady is still going. He did throw 3 interceptions in that game. Green Bay didn't capitalize. But you know what? That's just part of it. That throw to Scotty Miller to end the first half, that right there alone should deserve a Super Bowl appearance for them to pull that off, right? There were some brain cramps, some mistakes from Green Bay in that game. They didn't go for it on, I believe it was 4th and goal late in the game. You have to go for it there. And again, they were thinking we trust our defense, but you have to understand who's on the other side. This is where the difference comes in with Tom Brady. It's when Tom Brady's on that side, you just can't give him the ball in that spot. You can't. They're going to get a couple first downs, just like you would if Patrick Mahomes. If Patrick Mahomes was on the other end, you're not giving him the ball. You got to go for it, right? Instead, they kick a field goal, which really didn't do anything for them. They kick it off. Tampa Bay gets decent field position. That's the game. That mistake right there. And in the moment, I was thinking, they got to go for it here. It's not in hindsight. It's not what could have been. It's just, look, at the end of the day, if you don't convert on 4th and goal, okay, you got your defense is primed to get the ball back, right? They're motivated. They know Brady isn't in good field position. Whatever you do, you have to go for it there. That was a big mistake. The future of Aaron Rodgers is in doubt. We'll see. Remember, the storyline coming into this season was Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers. Got 3 years left in that contract. What's going to happen? They drafted a quarterback in the first round. They traded up to get him. It's going to be another intriguing offseason for the Green Bay Packers. But that is all for me here on Lock It Up Sports Talk. My name is Logan Lockhart. This is the Fines Huddle Network. I will see you next Wednesday. Follow me on Twitter at LGL Lockhart. Read, watch, everything. I'm there. And remember, when you have Hall of Fame votes coming in this year, it's all about next year, right? Remember that. That's my takeaway for the day. We have a prelude for what should be a wild and chaotic 2022 Baseball Hall of Fame announcement. 2021 was just the prelude. For Logan Lockhart, Lock It Up Sports Talk on the Fines Huddle Network, here I am, signing off.